The value of the month of November is peace. One of the reasons we have this value in November is to remind us of some of the things that have happened in the wars in the past.
We especially remember the Second World War, which was fought against Nazi Germany from 1939 to 1945.
So they're going to be changing formation position now, John, as they position just behind us into an echelon position, so they'll be alongside each other to run through for a second pass.
Marvellous, isn't it? Got the Hurricane flown by Squadron Leader Mark Liscombe and the Spitfire flown by Flight Lieutenant Andy Priest. 400 foot.
Yep.
Captain Tom Moore and Martin Water. He was a captain in the army and served mainly in India.
It's so lovely to see Captain Tom waving as they fly overhead. They're going to come around again.
A donation from Facebook has helped save some jobs at the Bletchley Park Wartime Coding Centre in Milton Keynes. Facebook is giving £1 million to the museum at the site, which has been facing a financial crisis.
Now the money from Facebook means some of those jobs can be saved, and the cuts in exhibitions and education programmes will not have to be so bad.
Facebook's boss in Northern Europe said, "The achievements of Alan Turing and the Bletchley team have benefited all of us greatly, including Facebook, and we're thrilled to help preserve the spiritual home of modern computing."
10 years ago, Professor Sue Black mounted a successful social media campaign to save the Bletchley site. She said she was delighted by the news of Facebook's donation.
The work done by Bletchley Park by thousands of people shortened the war by 2 years, saving millions of lives, she said.
We are so lucky to still have the place where the code breakers were available for everyone to visit.
The Bletchley site is near Milton Keynes, only 10 miles from our school. It is open to anyone to visit, although at the moment you have to book in advance.
The National Museum of Computing, which charts the development of machines such as a Colossus computer, is also on the site. This computer was used to crack German codes in the war.
Professor Black said both museums needed more help. I hope other tech companies follow suit, supporting Bletchley Park and National Museum of Computing, so that our children and grandchildren can learn about and appreciate our rich heritage.
September 1939. As Britain declared war on Nazi Germany, an extraordinary motley army was being assembled at Bletchley Park in the English countryside near London to fight a secret war. Their mission was to crack one of the hardest codes ever devised, created on a machine called Enigma. Enigma lay at the heart of Hitler's armed forces communications system.
Oh, there we are. I think that's me there. Weird. 75 years ago. 75? Yep. Yeah, that's what happens with time goes by. I only came back thinking I would join one of the services. I'm bilingual in Spanish and English, but I could speak German. I'd been to a German school in Buenos Aires, and I could also speak French. When we got to Tilbury to land, a man came on board and said I was to go and get into the car they had ready for me, and they drove me to Bletchley, but I had no idea what it was all about until we started work. I don't think a young girl nowadays would jump into a stranger's car and go off in the middle of the night, would she? You were just taken there and you accepted it. That was war. You'd have to receive these messages on the machines, so I'd have to decode it and translate it. You had to learn how to work the Enigma, and the messages were taken to the Air Force or wherever to get it to the people who would do something about it. We were all young people, so we had fun, we enjoyed it, and we knew that it was important. It was thanks to the code workers that the Bismarck and the Scharnhorst were sunk.
Days and nights of relentless pursuit of the Bismarck by the greatest convergence of warships ever participating in a roundup at sea.
When I went on that Atlantic convoy in 1940, 2 of our ships were torpedoed, and if you've ever heard groups of children crying and drowning in the middle of the night, you never forget it. And it was that really that spurred me on, and I was glad that I was doing something to retaliate. The Government Code and Cipher School, signed by Theresa May. We had to sign the vow of secrecy, and they told us in no uncertain terms if we let any secret out what would happen to our family. So for 70 years I haven't said a word to anybody, because even after the war there were spies around and revengeful people, you know. It just wasn't worth it.
And is it strange to talk about it now, then?
Very odd. Amazing. Still, fun, quite, if it's interesting to people.
One of the most well-known systems the Germans used was this machine called an Enigma machine. This machine was used to send secret messages to German soldiers, planes, ships and submarines.
The Enigma machine was so clever that it actually had 103 sextillion different possible combinations of code to use. It would take a human many years to crack this code, and the Germans changed it every month. But using their computers, it took the team in Bletchley just 10 months to crack the codes.
Once they had cracked the code, the British side could read the secret German messages. This helped them to find and sink German warships and shoot down enemy planes which were bombing England.
It's a beautiful machine. It's 1930s styling. It's all black and silver highlights. It's all wood and steel. Very nice. Very mechanical. But let's see how it works. So let's say I send you a message. I'm going to send you a message in code. I'm going to say hello to you, right? So I'm going to type in hello in the machine. Let's see how it works. So when I type in hello, I'll do the H first. And then I'll press H. There we go. Now if you can see that, the letter C lights up. The code lights up. That's H becomes C. Let's do the E for hello. E, there you go, becomes an I. So this is the code. L is an M. The second L in hello becomes a Q. And you finish it off, you do the O, And oh look, you get an M again. That's interesting. So that's the code. The machine doesn't transmit. It never did. It doesn't send anything. Someone has to stand next to it and write down the letters that light up. There is a reason it lights up. If you built it with a carriage, like a typewriter with paper, it made it heavier. It made it 8 times heavier. So that was the reason why it lights up, to make it portable. But you may have seen something odd about that. So the 2 L's in hello were 2 different letters. So old-fashioned codes, if you had double letters, they become double letters in your code. And for a code breaker, you can use that as a clue, helps you work it out. But this is different. No, a double letter might not be a double letter. If I do this again, if I press A, what have I got? I've got E there. If I press A again, I've got L, and it will keep changing. And there's no pattern to this. There's no way to know what it's going to be next. So you can see why the Germans thought they had an unbreakable code.
A few years ago, a film was made which showed Alan Turing and a team of code breakers cracked German code using new computers that they had built. Dominic Cumberbatch played Alan Turing.
What did you do during the war?
I worked in a radio factory.
What did you really do during the war?
Are you paying attention?
I want to know what it was like filming at Bletchley Park.
Amazing. It was amazing. I mean, what an extraordinary experience. I mean, obviously, as you guys know, I went around there a couple of times for research, and you were amazing. You opened doors and were so patient with, you know, a struggling actor's brain to try and sort of encompass what cryptography really is. To work in the environs where all this happened, where the people breathed, lived, loved, worked, struggled, kept secrets, were heroic, quietly, stoically, was really, really overwhelming. It was a very important part of the film. I think it wouldn't have felt right not to have had a moment with Bletchley Park featuring properly.
It's beautiful. It's the greatest encryption device in history. The Germans use it for all major communications.
Everyone thinks Enigma is unbreakable.
Let me try, and we'll know for sure.
I wasn't this, you know, front cover of every history book, because it's such an important impact. It had such an important impact on the world, and this is also this sort of like the man who was the forefather of the computer. I think it was very emotional for all the actors and for all the crew to be there, and this is where it actually happened.
In Bletchley Park, everywhere you looked, you realised that this was the architecture, this was the sky, some of the trees had been there way before any of them were even there, and it had something from nothing. You really feel that you're playing slightly with ghosts as well, so it's nerve-wracking, you know, it is, because you think we're fictionalising what really happened here.
What is it that we're really doing?
We're going to break an unbreakable Nazi code.
Oh.
To pull off this genius routine, one actually has to be a genius.
Why are you building a machine?
The machine will allow us to break every message and win the war.
Men and women from all walks of society, from all abilities, whether it be actors and artists to the more likely candidates of mathematicians and physicists and scientific thinkers, came together to try and crack a code that was basically, or many codes actually, that were the encryption devices of the Nazis, and they were winning the war. The country was starving, the clock was ticking, as is portrayed in the sort of pacing thriller element of our film. And to understand the importance of that is also to understand the importance of those men and women and the actual environments of where it happened. Millions of lives were saved. And it was all done in secret, and now we can look at that secret. So how could that not be one of the most important legacies we have in our culture of that era? It's incredibly important that it keeps going, incredibly important that it's open to the public, and something that's well funded and supported and continues, because this is our history.
You could help us, but you won't.
You will never understand the importance of what I am creating here.
I'm just a mathematician.
You've got more secrets than the best of them.
Even the oldest teachers in school were not alive in the Second World War. Only a few service like Captain Tom are left now.
But we can still see reminders around us, like the war memorials in many towns and villages across England. And like the Spitfire and Hurricane fighters that have been restored and can still fly today, 80 years after the Battle of Britain.
It is good to stop and remember that we can enjoy our lives today thanks to people like Captain Tom and the Code Breakers of Bletchley.
Once again, a form of war has taught us who we are. Young and old, rich and poor, backgrounds, cultures, generations. Once again, in this silent war, together, we are one nation. Once again, we will wear with pride a nation's thanks for those who've died. A people's thanks to those who care, whose sense of duty never errs.
It makes me feel immensely proud of our collective national effort in pulling together behind those on the front line to combat
this year, as they have for generations, the Armed Forces community has stepped up to support the nation through challenges no one expected.
23,000 service personnel are earmarked for the COVID support
force. An incredible relationship between the military, the NHS and communities up and down the country.
Right now, the Royal British Legion is helping those members of the Armed Forces community who are isolated from family, feeling lonely, facing homelessness and in financial crisis. So we need you. By supporting the Poppy Appeal, you will help the Royal British Legion support our Armed Forces community when they need it most. So please, show our Armed Forces community that we have their back, just as they've always had ours.
Heavenly Father, thank you for our schools. Fill our classrooms with learning and love. Fill our hearts with kindness and care.
Lord Jesus, help us to find peace when we are angry, compassion to forgive when we are wronged, and courage to try again when we fail. Holy Spirit, guide us in our darkest moments and lead us towards your light. Amen.